I got to be really honest with you. When I played back in 2010 to 2013, you thought about Arkansas, and as harsh as this is, it was an automatic sweep. And what Courtney Deifel has been able to do over the span of the last few years that she's been a head coach here has been nothing short of incredible. She's taken a team that you really didn't have any attention on them, and she's made them a powerhouse, a championship caliber program, and she does it the right way. I think she builds a culture that is good for the sport, good for the players that decide to wear that Arkansas jersey across their chest.
And good evening, Razorback fans. We want to welcome you to the Road to OKC postseason show. I am joined by Ethan Westerman, Justin McLeod, and Dorian Kraft, and we're going to have a roundtable discussion of everything college softball, not just Arkansas. We're going to discuss some UCA and just overall talk about the seedings, how everything's played out, and what's your favorite matchup. And what I'll do is I'll open up the floor, and we'll start with Ethan and go around. Just what have you seen this year with the popularity of the sport of softball? Because I've seen some people say that 5 years ago they didn't even know when the selection show was going to be. They didn't know where the tournament was going to be. So what have you noticed this year that separates this year from any other?
Yeah, I'm probably the most unqualified person on here to be talking about this, considering I just started watching. I got into college softball in 2021 because I covered the Fayetteville Super Regional between Arkansas and Arizona for an outlet in Arizona. And I was just like, after watching a Super Regional series, I was just like, this is an awesome sport. Why have I not been watching this more? So I think if we're going to be speaking on the growth we've seen in the sport, I just think I need to be, first of all, the testament to somebody who's gotten into the sport from watching it. I just think that it's incredible seeing kind of the TV figures that get posted after every single weekend. The SEC championship between Tennessee and South Carolina, I think, had 485,000 viewers, which was like the 18th most watched like original telecast of the week on Saturday. So that's a pretty crazy number right there that speaks volumes, I think, on the growth. But yeah, like I said, in the few years that I've actually been watching, because I covered last year and then I've covered this year, it just is, I've seen the evolution of Bogle Park just being on the Arkansas beat. They've set 9 of the top 10 attendance records. I get it. A lot of that comes with the success of the team, of course. But like, if you're setting game series after series, I keep on having to write a new thing about the second most attended game because it keeps on beating the previous one. So from a beat writer's perspective, I think that, yeah, it just seems like more people are getting drawn to it. And that all starts with television coverage on it and the job I think that ESPN's done of really shining a light on softball.
I mean, I think for me, let's see, this is 12, 13 years. Gosh, I've lost track. But I think the biggest thing for me, this kind of thing didn't happen 12, 13 years ago. You didn't have roundtables of people talking about college softball. You didn't have a lot of beat writers that covered college softball outside of, Arizona and maybe, Tennessee type of thing. You didn't have that presence. And I think that's as indicative of anything of how the game has grown, just because now you have, in addition to, you have people like me who covered just softball. You have people who call games, people like Dorian who are actually in the booth calling games. I mean, a few years ago, of course, ESPN Plus helped, but you didn't have that. And I think that's just indicative of a lot of growth in a lot of ways of the sport. But I look at that as one of the ways that it just hits me between the eyes of how different that aspect of it is in, the span of a decade.
I'm probably the most qualified to speak on this, but Porter, I made that exact point on Twitter on Selection Sunday. The discourse that is going around on social media about the brackets, are they fair? Is the seeding right? Who has the easiest path? That conversation speaks to the growth of the sport, because back in 2007, we went to Tallahassee. We won the ACC title. There was nobody in the stands. It wasn't being broadcasted. We made the Columbus Regional. We played against Ohio State that year, against Cal State Fullerton, and I forget who else was in there with us. It wasn't broadcasted anywhere. No one knew where it was. Only the players, the coaches, and their parents were watching. No one cared. And so to have the sport grow the way that it has the audience where we're continually setting records, where there's more interest, where the mid-majors are getting coverage as well, and something that I know that we'll get into. I also think that the transfer portal has helped the parity of the sport.
Yeah.
Parity continues across the sport. That's where the popularity rises as well, because it's not just like when I was growing up, UCLA, Arizona, Cal, all the teams out on the West Coast. Now it's Tennessee, it's Florida, it's Florida State, it's James Madison. You're seeing teams from all across the country get recognition, and that exposure only grows more exposure.
I'll keep it short and simple. Sam Torres, former Razorback, made a post on Facebook that I seen, and it was saying from free admission to packed berms in her 5 years and what she's seen just at Arkansas. That tells you the growth, and we're just looking at it from one school's perspective. I remember when UCA and Tech had a huge rivalry going on in the Sun Belt, back in the old Sun Belt, when they called it, UCA and Harding and Southern. Now you're getting to see UCA getting to beat Arkansas, the conversation. And Dorian, I want to ask you, I know it's not going to happen, and it might happen for however long, but just the thought of UCA being in the conversation of, hey, you should host a regional. What does that mean for someone who's covered the team and been around that program this year?
It means continued exposure, and it means continued growth. If you look at the RPI numbers, and Justin can speak to the RPI specifically as it pertains to who's qualified to host, but if you look at the RPI, that's where UCA is really in the conversation. Central Arkansas made a point this year. Head coach Jenny Parsons made a point to go out and schedule tough to eliminate any chance of whether or not they were going to get into the NCAA tournament. She wanted to give her team the in, regardless of whether or not they were the automatic qualifier. And so, Central Arkansas really laid the blueprint for how to make the tournament as a mid-major. I talked about this in the Sun Belt tournament as it pertained to Louisiana this year, where Louisiana followed the blueprint that UCF put together the year prior for hosting. And so if you kind of look at the progression there, obviously Louisiana has experience in the Women's College World Series, but Louisiana is where Central Arkansas wants to be in terms of the trajectory where the program is going for hosting, for being in that top 10 RPI. And so to have UCA be in that conversation, I think is really exciting for the state as a whole. And Porter, you and I talked about this around the Arkansas UCA game where UCA won. There were just as many young girls there that were fans of UCA that there were as Arkansas. And so that, to me, is the part of the conversation that gets overlooked a little bit, is because it's not always now you have to go to the big name school. You can also go to UCA, and they're going to be just as good, just as competitive. And I think there's a bigger conversation to be had there as well for mid-majors across the country. It doesn't always have to be the big name school.
And Justin, that's what I was going to ask you is, someone who's covered it, 13th year, you're used to covering the Power 5 schools. Now you're seeing the emergence of these mid-majors that someone probably is saying that you're the least qualified person to cover mid-major teams. But, we'll leave that for jokes, But anyways, what is it? What have you seen? And when did you really see the mid-major really start catching fire and other teams? I mean, Louisiana's been around for a while, but you see the emergence of UCA as well. When did you start taking notice and really have to start taking notice of mid-major teams?
So if you make ULL, you make the Raging Cajuns the exception. Louisiana, whatever you want to call them. I mean, I think I go back to probably 2015, 2016, James Madison, because you're talking about a JMU team that hired Mickey Dean, now at Auburn, hired him as head coach from an in-state school, just kind of a small step up. And Mickey went into James Madison and absolutely killed it. He went in there and he found recruits. The story of how he recruited Megan Good, who went on to be a multi-time All-American, played pro and all that. he found her at what amounts to a field surrounded by trees in the middle of Virginia somewhere. He got her to James Madison. She becomes an All-American and an absolute stud. And James Madison actually hosted LSU in a super regional, I believe it was in 2016. And if you just think about that, Harrisonburg, Virginia, James Madison, a different kind of purple and gold, and LSU has to go to them. Like the mid-majors were always kind of my bread and butter because I feel like there's good stories to be told at the mid-major level. But I go back to that as one of the first times when I really feel like in the modern day of softball, because you had the Cal State Fullertons and the Fresnos that would now be considered mid-majors. They were Women's College World Series contenders back in the 80s and 90s, even early 2000s. So that was kind of always there. But in the modern age of softball, in this where the divide is there between the Power Five and the mid-majors because of finances, if nothing else, I go back to those James Madison teams. They're hosting a regional, hosting a super, a win away from the World Series, and they were consistent. It wasn't a one-year wonder. It wasn't they had a great pitcher who then transferred kind of thing. They were consistent. They kept the talent, and that to me, when you asked that, that's the first one that popped into my head because I think since then the mid majors have just kind of continued rising and rising in attention. That's not the best word, but rising in attention and people paying attention to them.
And I guess we'll switch topics now. And Ethan, we'll start with you about just when we were watching and doing selection shows and stuff. Ethan, what was your outside of Alabama? Because I think we can have a conversation about that separately. Outside of Alabama, and this is no disrespect to Alabama, please, Bama fans, leave me alone. But what was your biggest surprise and what matchup are you looking forward to outside of Arkansas? Or are you looking forward to when you're talking about this postseason?
Yeah, so of course, Alabama was the big shocker. Whenever you see them announced at number 5, you just kind of double check to be like, did they just accidentally put the wrong team's name up? Did they accidentally do this out of order? And then that one, I mean, I'm still a little dumbfounded by, but I think everybody is. And I kind of thought at the moment, I said, this might be a good predecessor for the rest of the SEC teams, at least. And they did end up getting the most teams hosting the SEC. So, but that one, of course, right off the bat jumped off. But then I think that honestly, the regional paired with Arkansas is the one that I'm looking at the most. I'm like, that is a toughie for Oklahoma State to host Wichita State, who's beaten them twice this year. It would be similar to if UCA was coming to Fayetteville again. It's a team that's beaten OSU twice this year. So I don't think any OSU fans are probably excited to see that pairing. I also think of the Tallahassee regional, how South Carolina and UCF are in that one. If you're the 3 seed and you get that draw, you're probably like, wow, that's unfortunate. But yeah, those are probably the instant jumpers for me. Arkansas's regional is tough too, having Oregon to come to town, because I know they were in contention for getting to host. So yeah, those are some of the ones that jump off to me.
Dorian, what would be some surprises? Same question to you. Like, what are you looking more? I mean, outside of the UCA, we'll take the bias out of it and go outside of UCA. Which one are you?
My answer. I mean, the thing that surprises me the most, and actually Justin and I were texting about this while I was in New Orleans. I am surprised, and Justin told me not to be, but I'm surprised that Oklahoma State's a 6 seed. I know their body of work is strong, but the end of their season concerns me. Because it's been a tough slide. Obviously the big surprise for me in watching the regionals unfold was Louisiana not hosting, because I had gone into the Sun Belt tournament essentially being told by people who go through the bracketology, know all the science behind it, that the tournament, if Louisiana won, it's a lock, especially considering you're looking at Oregon lost around them, Auburn lost around them, like teams around where there was an impact were losing. And so that strengthened Louisiana's position. Now, Utah was the spoiler, right? So they changed everything by winning the Pac-12. That was Louisiana's regional to host. And you've seen what Utah, winning kind of does to the entire landscape. I was also surprised, I'll say, to see Texas State get in as the second Sun Belt team. I know it's because of the RPI. But we actually thought at the end of the day that the Sun Belt was going to be a 1-bid league, even though they are the 6th best RPI conference in the country, just because of the way everything else unfolded. So I think that's great for the Sun Belt to get 2 in. Apparently I'm still very pro Sun Belt after my week in New Orleans. But that's interesting as well, because they're going to Austin, and Texas State has already beaten Texas once this year. So that's something to pay attention to as well.
Justin, we already know your setup. You're going to have every kind of device and iPad, and you're going to go to pawn shops and borrow TVs for a weekend. Well, what's going to be on the big screen? Which one catches your eye when you look at it and say that, all right, I'm really going to be focused on this region?
I mean, there's a certain Mr. Hayes who's going to like me saying this, but honestly, Clemson and Auburn.
All right.
And I think there's two aspects of it. One, actually, that regional is very similar to Oregon going to Arkansas, because you have a 2 seed in a location that they were in last year where they saw their season end last year. Oregon saw their season end visiting the Arkansas Regional. Auburn saw their season end visiting the Clemson Regional last year. Auburn actually, I think, to me, is a better team. I think their offense has gotten better and has improved. I think Matty Penta is as good as they come in the circle. And Auburn's playing with a little more of a chip on their shoulder now because they had a legitimate chance to host a regional, or a legitimate case for that, didn't get picked, and now you're going back where they season ended last year. I mean, it's one of those things, the personalities and the people and the talent on that Auburn team, I don't really think they need the chip on their shoulder to have a shot at winning that regional, but when you add that, I think it gets even more interesting. And Clemson, in a different fashion, but similar to what Dorian said about Oklahoma State, Clemson has slid some in the back half of the season. Clemson has had some of those moments where, okay, are you really gonna host? Or that was right up to Selection Sunday. And so, how are they going to face the postseason when they've kind of been so in the regular season? And then Auburn's pretty red hot coming in.
I think for me, there's a numerous things. When we looked at the Florida State region, we were joking with Alyssa and Courtney at Big Trail Nation about, you're going to have Florida in that region. The past 3 projections, Florida. You look at Arkansas, it was a toss-up between Wichita State and probably UCA. Me and Dorian were talking about what would it be if UCA got put, and none of that stuff happened. And then the ball got dropped with Alabama being 5. And I'll tell you what, honestly, unshowing bias, I was very surprised they gave Arkansas 11 seed. I thought it was going to be higher. I thought it was going to be a 13, 14 seed because of the same things we're talking about, body of work. But they lost a couple of series. You think about the Missouri series, and me and Ethan talked last week of, I'm a big component of do not let, and this goes women's basketball, men's basketball, softball, don't let the conference tournament just depict your seed and you having to go make a run to try and build up and then of course they get pitted up against Alabama in a major matchup. And I'm like, yes, they lost, but it's almost like that Missouri series, they could have been in Auburn's spot. And I guarantee you, if that would have happened, they could be winning the SEC championship right now. Now they're 11 seed. So all those things that happen, and then you get paired up against Oklahoma State. The committee clearly did some teams favors. I want to say Arkansas included, Clemson included, and then, of course, Alabama, by putting some of these teams in. But they did, again, show some of the smaller teams, hey, we're going to let you in. You deserve to be in, like a UCA. Yeah, they have to go to Alabama. And I'll tell you what, and they're depending, and we haven't heard anything about Fouts' injury report yet, but even if she's available or not, she's not going to be 100%, and they have a serious chance to win that. And Dorian, my question to you is, you just said you were down there helping them out and stuff with their getting ready for this PR. Everybody has a target on UCA because they respect them. They can't come into this regional sneaking up on Alabama. How are they prepared for that, knowing that they're going into this and there's a lot of people giving them credit saying, hey, they can actually win this regional?
They were pretty loose today, to be completely honest. I think there's a lot of negativity out there on social media for people that, have never heard of UCA, or the Liberty fans that I'm not all that impressed, and the Marshall fans saying that UCA didn't deserve it. Like, there are a lot of fans that are giving some disrespect to UCA, and there are people, and Justin has responded directly to one of them saying, who's ever heard of Central Arkansas? Well, clearly you're not paying attention. That being said, though, UCA goes back to playing the schedule. This is why Jenny Parsons did it, so that at this point in the season, it's just another game. Yeah, it's going to be the postseason, so it's a good thing that they're a 2 seed, not a 4, so that they have the opportunity against Middle Tennessee to kind of work out some of those nerves. And it's not an immediate matchup against Alabama because you're going in, it's a tournament feel, it's a regional. None of them have ever been to a regional before. But, to paraphrase Coach Parsons down at the ASUN tournament, 5's not anything. We've already won 44. So to win 2 or 3 here, they're not really concerned about it. They understand that this is the next step in the evolution of where this program wants to go.
And to that point, you're talking about UCA, that's people saying they're just showing they've watched softball this year, and that's it. They don't see that they've beaten LSU. They've played Georgia. They've played Mississippi State. They beat Kansas 13-0. So, I mean, this is a team.
Everybody's so impressed with Kansas. Like, I need to have this conversation.
It is a fact.
In softball, yes, I know that they're a power 5, but like comparatively, we need to take Kansas out of that conversation. I'm really sorry. Yeah. I'm probably going to get some hate for it, but like Kansas basketball, sure. Kansas softball, not so much.
It's the fact that how bad they beat them. It's not like I'm saying,
fair.
They eked one out 8-7 over.
All right,
Kansas.
fair.
They beat them nothing. Yeah,
Yeah. No, okay. I mean, that's fair. And there's one thing I wanted to speak to that you were talking about as well. And I know, again, Justin, just because I follow Justin so much on Twitter with it, he mentioned this, but I agree. I like to see more mid-majors getting the opportunity as opposed to rewarding Power 5 teams for being mediocre. I think that is the conversation. I think that's the way that it should be. And I think Dot Richardson said it the best when I talked to her earlier this year. She said, everything's geared for Power 5 because their RPI gets higher by basis of the fact that they have the 3-game series. And so as a mid-major, it is so much more difficult to get that RPI up because you're playing one-offs and then you have to win. And so then also if you front load the schedule with tough RPI, you run the risk of losing and playing your way out of the NCAA tournament before February is even over. So I think that there needs to be a shift, and I'm glad there seems to have been slightly one this year to rewarding good mid-majors over rewarding mediocre Power 5s.
And Ethan, I'll hop this over to you when we're talking about Arkansas. They host Harvard, Notre Dame, and Oregon, and then, of course, they're matched up. It's like almost – Razorback fans, and how you feel about it, they're really pulling for Wichita State and the team that beat them because that would mean that Arkansas would get to host a Super. Now, what are your thoughts of that possibly happening, and what are your thoughts on how Arkansas is ready to go for this week in Fayetteville?
Yeah, well, fans might be rooting for Wichita State to beat Oklahoma State because that would get things back into Fayetteville. But I'm not so sure with how Oklahoma State's playing right now and how the body of work Wichita State has this year, which includes a run rule win over Arkansas. How great, I think that it's whoever comes out of that regional, the Stillwater one, Arkansas's got its hands full. I mean, Oklahoma State I think they've lost 11 of 13. Do I have my numbers correct? But I mean, it's still an Oklahoma State team that is a number 6 seed for a reason. It's a solid team. So I don't know necessarily if there's, I guess the win for Arkansas fans would of course be getting to host it back in Bogle. But I also think that going and taking it to the road into Stillwater would be really big for the sport as well too. That would definitely be a Super with a lot of eyes on it. If Arkansas was to make it outside of its own regional, which you asked me to talk about, and I jumped ahead to the first.
That's all right. I did want to add that Wichita State did beat Kansas 9-3. I did want to add that in.
No way. Didn't Kansas
throw that in? I'm sorry.
Didn't Kansas beat Oklahoma State in the Big 12 tournament?
Yeah.
So this is just the Kansas show.
Yeah.
No, wait. I thought after the athletic year that was had, I thought the consensus was Arkansas beat Kansas so often they now had to refer to themselves as Kansas.
Yeah. Well, that's my family in South Carolina. They call it Arkansas, and it just drives me insane.
True fact, I accidentally said that on air one time when I was still anchoring at THV 11. Didn't mean to. It just came out that way. Don't know why.
Oh, goodness. I didn't mean to cut you off, Ethan. I'm sorry. I just looked up Wichita State schedule, that gauntlet, and I seen they beat them. I had to tell Dorian real quick about that.
No, you're good. I wrote a little bit about this the night that the field was released, but it's such a similar, and Justin touched on it earlier with Oregon coming back to Fayetteville. The setup for Arkansas to get out of its own regional is so similar to last year that it's crazy. It's like you're playing an Ivy League team in the first game. Last year they played Princeton. This year it's Harvard. Then you got Oregon sitting there's the 2 seed, which a program that's been to the Women's College World Series 6 times as the 2 seed in your regional, and as a borderline host team, nobody's really, I think, too thrilled about that. But at the same time, it's that time of year that Courtney said it as well. Whoever you get, it's going to be tough. Like you said, people who have paid attention, Alabama knows that it's having UCA in their regional. That's really tough too, with the way UCA has been this year. You got to expect at this point that if you're going to make it out of your regional, like, you're going to have gone through a battle. And also, I will say an interesting thing to keep an eye on is Arkansas lost 3 in a row, lost twice in heartbreaking fashion to Missouri in its regular season finale, then the heartbreaker to Alabama. So Arkansas has lost 3 straight games by 1 run in each game. Oregon's lost 4 in a row. I think a sweep to Utah to end the season, and then lost to Stanford in the first round. And then Notre Dame comes in; they're on a 4-game losing streak. So somebody's going to break their losing streak in this one. Arkansas has been such a streaky team this year, and so has Oregon, because I believe before their 4-game losing streak, they had a 13-game winning streak. So it just makes you wonder with the way that these teams have been this year. I know Arkansas, after it went through that stretch where it got run ruled by A&M and Wichita, went and took a series at Alabama, then took a series against Florida at home. So it'll be interesting to see which team comes out of the Fayetteville Regional, if they're able to build on that momentum. And, I'm sure that if Oklahoma State was to make it out of their regional, it'll be interesting to see if one of these teams from the Fayetteville Regional can march into there and punch a ticket to the Women's College World Series. I will say Notre Dame's also on a losing streak of 4 games, and theirs has been a little bit uglier than Arkansas's and Oregon's. They've gotten beaten by a combined 31-3 score over their past 3 games, which is just, never good for the
Vibes either.
Yeah, they've gotten beaten pretty bad recently. And here's your bizarre stat of the day that I'm sure Justin, Dorian, they might not know the exact numbers on this stat, but it will make sense because they've been following the sport for so long, and you, Porter. But I think I already told you this. Notre Dame enters this regional having gone to 26 regionals before. They've been to, this will be their 27th. They've been to 23 in a row leading up to this year. They have never made it to the super regional round, which that's just a number that blew my mind when I was looking at it. I was like, am I actually looking at their year by year correctly? Am I just missing a line about super regionals? But they've been to 23 consecutive regionals and never made it out to a super, which is a crazy stat. I don't know why I felt like sharing that, but I did.
Dorian, I know we got to get you out of here real quick, but I was going to see, your prediction. And does anybody beat OU? We're talking about fans that they were talking about, OU fans were talking about how Alabama has an easier road. And I don't think there's any easier road than playing at home, and then playing at home.
Listen, you can have the easiest road you want. Oklahoma is closing in on Arizona's record of 47 consecutive wins. I don't care what your road is. Right now, Oklahoma is the favorite. They have the one-off to Baylor. Baylor is a whole other thing that I could talk about for an entire year because I don't understand the Bears. They have had some really good wins and some really terrible losses, so that's always interesting. But right now it's Oklahoma's tournament to lose. They won last year. They went out. They pulled Storako out of the transfer portal. They reloaded. For me, Oklahoma is still the best team in the country, and I think they're going to win again. So they remind me of early 2000s UConn's women's basketball. Eventually somebody will step up and be able to meet them where they are. But until that time, it's still going to be Oklahoma.
Well, Dorian, I really appreciate your time. What were you going to be? You've got the Arkansas softball this weekend, and then after that, are you going to be doing any kind of softball coverage? Or
I'm not doing softball coverage, but you can watch my national debut with the APP in New York. I'll be calling pickleball this summer.
There we go. Well, good luck with that, and we'll definitely be tuning in. Thank you, Dorian.
All right, thanks, guys.
We want to appreciate Dorian's time. Of course, Justin, you as well, because this is a busy time for you. I know you've kind of got to wrap it up as well. So, just give us, your predictions again. I mean, just like what I asked Dorian, do you see anybody touching OU? I know UCLA's sitting down there, but with it being in Oklahoma City, I'll end it on this. You've covered softball for a very long time. Explain how hard is it for somebody to go into Oklahoma City with OU being as dominant as they are and beating them not only in pool play, but then possibly having to turn around, beat them in pool play, and then beat them in a 2 out of 3 series.
It's rough. I mean, you saw Oklahoma in the 21 World Series with James Madison. They lost that first game to James Madison. Nobody saw it coming. And Oklahoma ran the table from there, but nobody saw that James Madison upset coming. So this Oklahoma team has gotten better since then. But do I think somebody can beat Oklahoma? I do. I think Oklahoma is a beatable team. Nobody's going to beat them twice.
That's what I was getting at.
Yep.
I mean, anybody can get beaten on any given day. It's just
even Oklahoma. It doesn't happen often, but they can. But nobody's beaten them twice, and certainly nobody's beaten them twice in the same day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, more than anybody, I really appreciate your time because I'm no disrespect to anybody else, but I don't think there's a softball person out there that does as much as you do, going to Fayetteville, going down to Ruston, coming back, and just now you're able to sit back and relax in your own home and enjoy softball for a week. And I know this is going to be your version of March Madness with all the TVs and the craziness. So, Justin, it's always a pleasure. And I
appreciate you.
If Arkansas makes it out of the regional and we're talking about supers, hey, we'll have you on again next week and we'll talk about it again.
Anytime. I appreciate you guys. I'll see you around.
Later, man. And there was just two, Ethan, just us now. I tell you what, it's really like we opened the show with, and just the fact that we're having a show about everything softball. We're not just talking about Arkansas, but I'm excited to see how Arkansas responds. We know the coaching staff. We know what Coach Deifel. We know Gamble and Dels and all the, Kamenzien's, Matt. I mean, we were talking about practice earlier and just how methodical Matt is when he runs practice, and Coach Yo. This coaching staff is going to have them ready. I see them getting out of the region. It's just how many. I mean, who do they drop to, and who is that lost to?
You're asking me who they? Oh,
do you see them getting out of the region?
I mean, I think that I mean anything can happen in postseason. I'm not ruling anything out, but I think that clearly if there's a team that's going to beat them in region right now, it looks like it would be Oregon. I mean, it's a really solid Oregon team. You can't shut out UCLA earlier in the year and not be solid. I think they would 3-0. So if they don't make it out of their region, out of their own regional, I would think it would be Oregon that maybe would. But you just never know. Maybe Notre Dame out of nowhere catches heat. But definitely am intrigued by it. I think that I'm kind of the mindset that the super regional pairing worked out better for them. Their own regional is tougher, in my opinion, than it has been the past few times they've hosted. But then their pairing with a super regional has been a better setup.
Yes,
so it's kind of like you take it because you have to beat in the postseason. You have to beat tough teams at some point. So you might as well take care of business early. Like, who cares if you're who cares if you lose to a really good team that ends up going like Texas did last year and proving that you got eliminated by a really tough team. That's how these postseason formats work. The best teams rise to the occasion, and at the end you have your championship. So it's like, I think one of these teams from the pods from Fayetteville, Stillwater, I could see one of the teams in this pod making a deep run in the Women's College World Series. So it's one of those deals where it's like, if Arkansas does lose before Oklahoma City, I just think it's because they ran into another really solid team. At this time of year, there's no slouches. So
yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, maybe third time's a charm. They go on the road this time and be that team that goes on the road and proves, hey, look, yeah, we got denied 2 years in a row at our own house. Now it's time. Let's go to Oklahoma State. Let's go over there and show them, hey, we belong in Oklahoma City. And it's like what me and Jacob was talking about last night in, the baseball team deserving a national championship for Dave Van Horn. It would be a gritty team like this year's team to win a College World Series. It's like this team right here that, we were looking at possibly going to Tennessee or Florida State for the Super Regional, and now they get possibly paired up with Oklahoma State and maybe hosting if Wichita State comes out of that region. It would be a team like this that gritty and grinds and flips that switch that ends up making it to Oklahoma City and getting that College World Series appearance for Coach Deifel. And again, like we said about Coach Van Horn and somebody who deserves a national championship, there's not a coach in America that deserves a trip to Oklahoma City and a chance to win a Women's College World Series than Coach Deifel. I mean, her and his staff, all three of them combined, and her support staff have done wonders. They've overtaken this state when it comes to the popularity of the sport. They have helped other teams like UCA come up, Southern Arkansas come up, and build their programs. And it's just because the growth of the game, where kids are going to UCA and watching Arkansas and UCA, they're packing Bogle and made the SEC tournament the highest attended SEC tournament ever.
Yeah. And to be complete, I'm just fresh on my mind about the attendance record. Those are tickets sold, so we don't know how many butts and seats we actually had, but every tournament's gone by tickets sold. So you'd have to figure that
everybody's going to find a way to piss about something. You know what I'm saying? It's like, be happy for the attendance. Like, they sold those tickets. People went.
Yeah, it's set the attendance records for tickets sold regardless, because that's what everybody's gone by. But yeah, on your point, I think that right now, just where the program's at, like I talked about earlier, with attendance records being set during the regular season, like every single weekend, it's like having to rewrite the top 10 crowds book. It's crazy what's happened since she's taken over, because as you talked about with Sam's post, they used to be just giving away, like, please somebody come.
Yeah.
Now I have friends who are like wanting to go to the Arkansas-Alabama softball game. And they're like, I don't think I can go because at this point I need to get it off of like a third party and it's being sold for like $70. I'm like, that's just ridiculous how much it's grown. I will say, I don't think that any team that comes to Fayetteville will be as prepared as Courtney will have that team. I mean, if you've won your own regional every single time you've ever hosted it, that speaks volumes. And not the past two regionals, actually, I think every regional they've hosted in Fayetteville, they haven't even lost a game in it. They've wiped the slate at their own regionals, which just speaks volumes about the consistency that she's built. I do think that this year it's one of those things that if it was this bunch that made it to Oklahoma City, it would just kind of it'd be one of those stories that you're like, it would be last year had the flashy team because they hit the long ball so well. And I mean, that team that group that graduated last year, like they paved the road for everybody else to come in this program with what they accomplished. And it would be kind of funny if it was, this bunch that you've seen hit so many highs and lows this year that was able to figure out a way. It's kind of like what happened last year with the baseball team, in my opinion, how their run to the Omaha kind of came out of nowhere. It would be kind of similar. I say it came out of nowhere. They were good all year, but at the end of the year, I know a lot of people had their doubts, especially, seeing them get sent to the Stillwater Regional to start things. Or was it Stillwater Regional and then Supers was
North Carolina?
Oh, yeah. So, but I will say, no matter what happens in the postseason for this Arkansas team, I think that the future is super bright for them, considering the fact that you had a team this year that hit that low that they had whenever they dropped 4 straight games, twice to A&M, one of those a run ruled at Wichita, and then they lost the opener at Alabama. To see a young team respond the way they did and have the SEC season that they had after that, I think no matter what, going into next season, have to feel good about not only where the program has been and what she's built to this point, but I mean, you have so many young players that the future is extremely bright. So,
yeah, and in the past 2 years, you win the SEC, you win the SEC tournament. You're not, and Coach Deifel is going to get mad at me for saying this because I mean it is very tough, but you cruised into the super regionals. You had the talent, you had the senior leadership, you had all this stuff going for you, the hype of the build of the team and the state coming behind you. You had all that excitement behind you. And I am very impressed with this year because the fact that when you have players like, Malkin, Gibson, Burnside, all those players, McEwen, come and go, you've got a few key components of your team with Dels and Gamble coming back, and you're rebuilding your team, and those girls set the foundation for this program. What are you going to do to keep that momentum going? And for them to still be in this spot where they are an 11 seed, but they have a chance to come out of the regional, have a very good chance and favor to go to Oklahoma City. This team's had a bunch of bumps and bruises. They've battle tested. They've got a button in. I think, again, what we said, a team like this, as in, I think they got that chip back on their shoulder. They've got something to prove. Like, look, I know we're not just a 2-year program. We're back. We're here to stay. We're on a mission to Oklahoma City, and they have just as good a chance to get to Oklahoma City as any, just because how things are set up.
Yeah, I think that one of the most encouraging things for Arkansas fans this year probably has to be that you saw late in the season somebody like Harha, but Hannah Kamenzend.
Yep.
What she's done. You see Reagan Johnson at the top of the lineup being 15th in the country in hits. You've seen Reagan Kramer, who's a sophomore on the team, and she was on teams with those really, really, program pillar players. And if you didn't see her catches in the outfield against Alabama and be impressed, I don't know what else can impress you. I think that what's been encouraging probably is just to see these people that you never have seen before all of a sudden rise to the occasion. And really, without a lot of these new pieces, this team would be nowhere where they are right now. Hannah Kamenzend, I think that Tennessee series, what she did in that series, I think
that took the freshman badge off of her.
That was the
freshman badge off. She's seasoned. We talk about season, and that threw a little bit of extra ranch seasoning on her as a pitcher. And you watch somebody grow up before your eyes in that series, as in, I'm going to do what it takes. And a lot of people don't realize just how much, not an advantage, but how cool it is. You get your sister to catch for you. And when you're having those moments of frustration, nobody's going to pick up on that quicker than your sister. And for her to be behind the plate in between innings, be able to sit there and calm her, hey, you've got this, and that comfort, that's one of them intangibles that I know they get talked about because being sisters on the same team and being successful. But that's one of those intangibles that can be very beneficial and you can have with you all 4 years that you're here at Arkansas.
Yeah, I think that's what's got to be the exciting thing for people who follow and watch the Arkansas program is there are players this year that if as long as barring crazy injury or something just really unfortunate, like it's like the next you saw this year, the next generation of those players that by the time they're their senior years, they're like a Danielle Gibson or like a Lenny Malkin, that you're like like Lauren, Hannah, Reagan Johnson, Reagan Kramer, all these young players, Atalia Rijo, how she's played shortstop this year. It was just they did that this year and got the number 11 overall seed. It's just kind of crazy to see it unfold. And I think that it's one of those deals where, they could have hit that rough point in the season whenever they all of a sudden started getting, they had some really tough games there that you just felt like they had to be, they had to be demoralizing. And then they bounced back. That series on the road at Tuscaloosa, I will come back to it, I think, over and over, because it's whenever their season did change this year, whenever they figured it out down there, a young team. And I think that, the future's just got to be bright, knowing that you got those pieces this year, that by the time that they're, Reagan Johnson is playing like a senior right now, mm-hmm. and she's a freshman. So I think that they've got a really bright future ahead with the team, and they keep on recruiting well. So
yeah. And that was one of the questions coming in. How's recruiting looking for next year? We got two of the top players in the state coming, Casey Wood, Jaden Wells out of Paris, and Casey Wood out of Bentonville. And there's freshmen on the team that you're going to look forward to next year. It's almost like in the game of softball, you keep building that program, but at some point you got to start recruiting every other year because just how talented and deep, and we got to think about the transfer portal. So that's another key element to this recruiting is the portal already opened today, and I think it's May 18th to June 21st or something like that window. So be interesting to see how all that plays out. But I guess we'll wrap it up with this. It's going to be an exciting weekend of I will not be in attendance. Unfortunately, I'll be in Oklahoma City a couple of weekends early, going there, traveling there for a birthday outing. So, Ethan, just looking forward to your coverage and really appreciate what you've done for the sport, for being thrown into the fire like you have been, and really take it full on, and to be in the position you are. I'm really, really proud of where you're at and how far you've come.
Thanks, Porter. Means a lot. I think that it's kind of crazy because, it wasn't just for the players this past week where, you felt like your conference tournament was the warm up for for me, covering an SEC tournament with 12 teams, 24 press conferences. Definitely am excited this week that it lowers to 4 teams.
Yeah, you won't be there in rain delays. And
I don't want to speak too fast about the rain delays because we don't ever know whenever Mother
I'm talking about like a 12-hour one. You ain't going to be there.
Hopefully not. That was miserable, but yeah, thanks so much for those words. I'm definitely enjoying getting to cover this softball team. I definitely walked into a good situation.
Hopefully next week we're talking about a super regional, but are we going to be traveling or are we going to be hosting? So we'll, again, when Arkansas gets out of the region and we find out where they're going for the supers, we're going to come back again next Monday, have Justin and Ethan on. We're going to talk about the matchups and then talk about other matchups around the country of supers that we're looking forward to. And then we'll keep the show rolling. Hopefully we're talking about the week after that, a trip to Oklahoma City. But for Ethan, I'm Porter. It's been a great time. Appreciate everybody tuning in. As always, we're brought to you by Bet Online, and we will catch you on Sunday.